October always has a certain chill in the air, doesn't it? The nights feel longer, the shadows seem darker, and the smallest sounds can send a shiver down your spine. Tonight, I want to take you through a collection of spooky stories, the kind that stay with you long after the lights are out. Some are personal experiences, some passed down, and some are whispered legends. So grab a blanket, dim the lights, and let's dive in.
I was about 7 years old when it started happening. Every night, just after my parents tucked me into bed and turned out the light, I would see it. At first, I thought it was my imagination, one of those tricks your eyes play on you in the dark. But it kept happening. From my bed, I had a perfect view of the hallway. And every night, just past midnight, I'd see a figure standing there, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Too tall to be my mom, too broad to be my dad. Just a dark shape, lingering right at the edge of the light from my nightlight. I tried to tell myself it was just a shadow from the coat rack or the way the moonlight hit the curtains. But this shadow, it wasn't flat against the wall, it was standing there. And the longer I stared, the more I felt it staring back. I remember pulling the blanket over my head, heart pounding so loud I was sure it could hear me. Some nights I'd fall asleep that way, drenched in sweat, too scared to move. Other nights I'd build up the courage to call for my parents. "Mom, Dad!" I'd whisper shout. They'd come into the room, turn on the light, check the hallway, and of course there was nothing there. My mom would hug me, say I just had a vivid imagination. My dad would ruffle my hair and tell me to get some sleep, and I wanted to believe them. I really did. But the moment the lights went out again, the shadow would return. One night I decided to test it. I left my door cracked open wider than usual. I figured maybe I could see more of the hallway and prove to myself it was all in my head. Midnight came, and sure enough, there it was. But this time, the shadow wasn't at the end of the hall. It was close, or it stood right in front of my bedroom door. I froze. I couldn't scream, I couldn't breathe. I just stared as the figure leaned forward, as if it was about to step inside. And then, it didn't, it just stayed there, watching me. The next thing I remember is waking up in the morning, sunlight streaming into my room, and my door closed tight. To this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was just the tricks of a tired kid's mind. Or maybe it was something else, something that knew when my parents weren't watching, and liked to remind me that I wasn't really alone at night.
I used to drive for a rideshare app during college, mostly late nights because the pay was better and the streets were quieter. One night, around 2 a.m., I got a ping from someone requesting a ride on the edge of town. The area wasn't exactly busy, but the app promised surge pricing, so I accepted. When I pulled up, there she was, a young woman, maybe in her 20s, standing alone under one of those flickering streetlights. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just quietly got into the back seat. I remember thinking how pale she looked, almost gray in the light. "Where to?" I asked, glancing at her in the mirror. She said an address softly, barely above a whisper. It wasn't far, just 10 minutes down a long stretch of empty road. The kind of road where the trees on either side close in like walls, and your headlights only illuminate just enough to remind you of how dark it really is.
The whole time she didn't say a word. No small talk, no checking her phone, no shifting in her seat. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on the road ahead. At one point, I tried to lighten the mood. I said, "Quiet night, huh?" But she didn't answer, didn't even blink.
I felt my skin crawl. Something about her presence felt wrong. Not threatening, exactly, just heavy. Like the air in the car was too thick to breathe. When we finally reached the address, I pulled over in front of a small run-down house. Porch light was off, windows dark. She didn't move. I turned slightly and said, "We're here." Still nothing. I looked in the rearview mirror again. The back seat was empty. My chest seized up. I whipped around so fast I nearly tore my neck. Nobody was there. Not a single sound, not even the click of a door opening or closing. The car was locked. I would have heard it. I sat there in stunned silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Finally, I put the car in drive and sped out of there, heart hammering like I'd just seen a ghost. The worst part, when I checked the rideshare app later, there was no record of the trip. No passenger, no destination, no fare, just a blank spot in my history where the ride should have been. To this day, I don't take late-night fares on that side of town, and whenever I drive alone at night, I can't help but glance at the rearview mirror, just to make sure I really am the only one in the car.
When I was about 12 years old, I had the misfortune of having my bedroom on the ground floor of our old house. Most kids wanted that room because it meant easy access to sneak outside, but for me, it meant my window was just a few feet away from the backyard, and whatever might be out there at night. One winter evening, I stayed up later than I should have, reading comics with a flashlight under the covers. The rest of the house was dead quiet, everyone asleep, and the only sound was the occasional groan of the old wooden walls as they settled in the cold. Around midnight, I finally turned off my light, rolled onto my side, and started to drift. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the glass of my bedroom window. At first, I thought maybe it was just a branch in the wind, but the sound was too distinct. 2. Intentional. I froze under the blanket, barely breathing. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to scream for my parents, but something inside me whispered that if I acknowledged it, if I moved, whatever it was would know I was awake. So I just lay there, eyes wide, staring into the darkness. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the blanket down just enough to peek toward the window. That's when I saw the silhouette. A tall, thin figure stood just beyond the glass, motionless except for one pale hand slowly tapping on the pane. The street light from the corner caught just enough of its face to show it wasn't quite right. I ducked back under the blanket, heart racing, convinced that if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. The knocking grew louder, faster, almost frantic now, and then, suddenly, silence. I don't know how long I stayed hidden like that. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear, and I fell asleep. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the window like nothing had ever happened. For a brief second, I convinced myself it was just a nightmare. But when I looked at the glass, my stomach dropped. Right there, smudged against the pane, was the outline of a handprint, long, thin fingers pressed against the glass, far larger than any adult I knew. We moved houses a few years later, and I never told my parents what happened. But sometimes, when I'm alone late at night, I swear I hear it again.
Knock, knock, knock.
When I was a teenager, my family moved into an old farmhouse that had been sitting empty for years. It was charming in its own way. Creaky wooden floors, slanted ceilings, the smell of dust and old timber. But right from the first night, something about the place felt off. At first it was small things. I'd hear scratching at night, faint but constant, like something was crawling just inside the walls of my bedroom. My parents brushed it off, saying it was probably mice. But the sounds didn't match. Mice scurry quickly, sporadically. This was slow, methodical, like fingertips dragging across wood. One night, I couldn't sleep, so I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The scratching stopped, only to be replaced by a low, hollow tapping. Tap, tap. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. Sometimes I'd hear whispering, muffled but distinct, as if 2 people were speaking through the plaster. I'd press my ear against the wall, heart pounding, and the whispers would stop instantly, leaving only silence. Other nights I swore I felt a vibration against the wall behind my bed, like something was moving through it. The worst part was that no one else in the family seemed to notice. My parents laughed it off. My little sister was too young to care. But I could feel it. Whatever was in there wasn't a nest of animals. It was aware. One evening, while home alone, I decided to prove it to myself. I grabbed a flashlight and went down into the basement, where the old stone foundation met the wooden beams. Cobwebs clung to my face as I ducked under pipes, shining the light along the walls. At first, nothing. Just dust, old boards. Then my beam caught something. Carved into the wooden support beam, in jagged, uneven letters, were words scratched deep into the surface.
Let me out.
The air in the basement grew heavy, colder than the rest of the house. My flashlight flickered, and in that dim glow, I swore I saw something shift behind the wall. A shape, too tall, too broad to be an animal, pressing just beneath the boards as if it was trying to push through. I bolted upstairs, slammed the basement door shut, and refused to go down there again. To this day, I don't know what lived in those walls, and maybe I don't want to. But sometimes, when the night is very quiet, I hear it again in my dreams. The slow scratching, the tapping, and that same muffled whisper, repeating the words over and over.
Let me out.
This happened back when I was in college. I was staying up late in my dorm room, cramming for an exam. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so the place was dead quiet, just me, my notes, and the hum of the old desk lamp. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something in me thought maybe it was important. So, half distracted, I picked up. At first, all I heard was static. Not the kind you get from a bad connection. This was thicker, like the hiss of an old radio caught between stations. I was about to hang up when I heard a voice cut through. It was faint, childlike, and it said my name. I froze. Nobody called me by that name anymore, not the way they just had. It was the exact way my grandfather used to say it, drawing it out in this warm, affectionate tone. But here, it didn't sound warm, it sounded wrong. Like someone trying to imitate his voice but not quite getting it right. I whispered, "Hello?" The line went dead. I figured maybe it was a prank, or maybe I was just overtired, but a few minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number. This time, I answered with my heart pounding.
I'm outside.
I shot up from my chair and ran to the window. My dorm overlooked the quad, which was mostly empty at that hour. I scanned every shadow, every corner, nothing, just the stillness of the night. But when I put the phone back to my ear, I heard heavy breathing, slow, measured, like whoever it was wanted me to know they were listening to me. I hung up, turned my phone off, and tried to shake it off. Eventually, exhaustion got the better of me, and I fell asleep at my desk. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the call log. That unknown number wasn't so unknown anymore. Somehow my phone had saved it. And when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. It was my own number. The calls had come from me. Even now, years later, I've never been able to explain it. But every once in a while, late at night, I'll think I hear my phone buzz, and I'll feel that same icy dread, wondering if I pick up whose voice I'll hear on the other end this time.
When I was a kid, there was this old mirror in my grandmother's house that always creeped me out. It wasn't fancy, not some antique with a carved frame or anything, just a tall, slightly warped mirror that leaned against the wall at the end of the upstairs hallway. But for some reason, I always hated walking past it at night. One summer, when I was around 12, my parents left me with my grandmother for a few weeks. I'd sleep in the guest room right across from that hallway, which meant that every time I left the room, to grab water or to go to the bathroom, I'd catch that mirror in my peripheral vision. And sometimes I'd swear the reflection didn't quite match. It was subtle at first. I'd glance at it and think I saw myself pause a second too long after I'd moved. Or maybe the tilt of my head looked just a little off. I chalked it up to my imagination. But one night, after a nightmare woke me up, I walked out into the hall, and this time, the reflection didn't move at all. I froze. I stood there, hand on the wall, staring at myself in the mirror. My chest was heaving from the bad dream, but in the glass, nothing. Just a calm, stiff version of me standing unnaturally still. And I'll never forget this, the reflection smiled. I bolted back into the guest room, slammed the door, and buried myself under the blankets. I didn't leave until morning. The next day, I convinced myself it had just been a trick of the light, or that I'd been half asleep. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And that night, I decided to test it. I stood in front of the mirror on purpose, wide awake, staring. For a long time, nothing happened. Just me looking tired and pale in the dim hallway light. But as I leaned in closer, I noticed something strange. The reflection's eyes weren't lined up with mine anymore. They were slightly lower, like it was studying me from beneath my own skin. That was the last straw. I ran downstairs and told my grandmother everything. She just looked at me quietly, like she already knew what I was going to say. Finally, she sighed and said,
"That mirror belonged to your great-grandfather. He hated it too. He said it didn't show you. He said it showed what was waiting to take your place."
The next day, she had the mirror carried out to the shed and covered up. To this day, it's still there under an old blanket. I've grown up since then. I've lived in different houses, different cities. But I still avoid mirrors in dark hallways. Because sometimes, when I glance too quickly, I swear I see that same smile waiting to greet me.
Maybe these stories are just tricks of the mind. Maybe they're coincidences. Or maybe, just maybe, they're little glimpses into something beyond what we can explain. What I do know is this: when the air is cold and the nights are long, we start to pay attention to the things we usually ignore, the creaks, the whispers, the shadows. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and the silence sets in, listen closely. You might hear nothing, or you might hear more than you bargained for. Thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, sleep tight, and don't forget to check the shadows.